Welcome to Insights from the Couch, where real conversations meet real life at midlife.
We're Colette and Laura, two therapists and best friends, walking through the journey right alongside you. Whether you're feeling stuck, restless, or just unsure of what's next, this is a space for honest conversations, messy truths, and meaningful change.
And our Midlife Masterclass is now open. If you're looking to level up, get into action, and make midlife the best season yet, go to insightsfromthecouch.org and join our waitlist. Now let's dive in. Okay, we're here today with Dr. Juliana Hauser, our friend who we love so much. We're so happy to have you back. And today we're going to be talking about your new book that's just coming out now, A New Position on Sex, and how it pertains to our journey at midlife as sexual beings, as women. Let's dive right into it. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be back.
We're so happy to have you. So many of our listeners might have heard your last episode. Laura, did you see what number?
Yes, it's episode 37. It's Yucks, Yums, and Yes, Please.
Oh, it's a great
It's a
title.
great episode.
It was so good. That
You
was like
want
one of the
more.
most fun episodes we've ever recorded.
Yeah.
So if you haven't heard it, go back and listen to that one too. And I want to just kind of have you reintroduce yourself to our audience in case they haven't met you yet.
Yes. So by trade, I am a therapist, a marriage and family therapist, and licensed professional counsel also. And I am a sex educator, sex therapist. And so I fall into both worlds and do work. Some of my work is truly just focused on sexual health and wellness, and others is solely on mental health. And there's lots of overlap between the two.
Yeah. So you have all the pieces to really tackle this issue. So tell us a little bit about, we were chatting before we got on here, a little bit about what's really relevant for women, particularly at this stage at midlife, about our sexual journey and our own personal evolution as women.
So a little backing up a bit, the book that you mentioned is something that I've been working on and researching for 20 years. And one of the things that felt really important to me was that it was a framework that no matter what your age, no matter who you were, no matter what your background was, any of your details, that this framework was something that would fit for you and fit for someone who was sitting next to you that was completely different. When I think back on, I was 30 years old when I started this research and started looking at sexuality, and I thought I was just so big and grown up and I knew everything. And I look back and like, oh, you were a baby. You were just a baby in this. And I also think, wow, I would have never predicted a lot of what happened in these 20 years in my life, and a lot of what has happened in the world culturally, and who we are as sexual being, and particularly who we are as women. I never thought that when I would be talking about this book that there'd be so much happening in the world. Yeah. And I also go back and think, never did I hear perimenopause or menopause in any of my training 20 years ago. I know it's still not even a part of our education now for those who are becoming therapists, as well as sexuality. And I know we've talked about that previously, that we don't have to have training in sexuality to become a therapist in most states and in most of our disciplines in the mental health world, which is just crazy in a lot of ways. So this book it's really for all of us. And I did a lot of work over these 20 years to test it and to work with people. And what I found for women who are going through this framework, and the framework is really figuring out who you are as a sexual being through the lens of agency. So it is not a book that is prescriptive in saying what is the right sexuality, what is the wrong sexuality, right. And it's not sex tips. I love those things, but I don't love the telling you what to do part. But I love
right. Tips. Yeah.
But what I want is, I want this to be, and I think particularly for me, and I go through the framework myself every couple of years. When I've done it recently, I realized as a woman, I'm 53, that it feels more important than ever to be doing things on my terms and to be revisiting what is right for me as who I am as a sexual being. And the details, and I call them intersections in the book, the intersections of relationships or life experiences or phase of life is really different. And it even is different from a year ago. As I've told you all before, a year ago, I had a hysterectomy. So if I had done this framework before my surgery, it would have been very different than it is now. And to me, I feel like that's the beauty of the work of this book is I want women at this age to look at the framework of holistic sexuality as a place of hope and as a place of I get to decide what I want and who I am. And as we said before, our yeses and nos, our yucks and our yums on our own terms. And that the framework is there for you to not feel alone, to have a guidance, but almost like a doula instead of someone that's telling you what to do, but also not leaving it on your own so that you don't have paralysis by choice. Because that's a lot of what I hear from women is, I don't know where to begin. I like what you're saying. Like it resonates. I want to do sexuality on my own terms, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
And honestly, what are my options?
Yeah.
And this book and the framework in the book is part of that.
So I love this, but I want to just say like the quiet part out loud. What I hear from women at midlife, and everyone's different, like everyone's range of sexual, how in touch they are with their own sexual being is vastly different. But the refrain I hear a lot is, oh my God, I just want to crawl into bed at like 8:00, be left the hell alone with my book. I like have, maybe there's like moments where I feel sexual. Maybe that opens up occasionally, but for the most part, it's really not front of mind. And I mean, tell me why for that type of woman, which I hear a lot, how does your framework speak to that woman and how can she get something out of what you're writing about in this book?
Yeah, and I love that phrasing, speaking the quiet. That was really well stated. And because also like when you said it that way, it really does speak to the shame also that happens, that it almost feels like a confession that when women are sharing, like, I really don't want, this is like, I feel okay with this being it, but is it okay? And is it okay that I'm in my pajamas, or what are going to be the side effects, or should I be feeling something different? And so the beginning of it for me is shame reduction is so important to know who you are as a sexual being, and you have to try to release yourself from comparison, particularly you of your older self or your former self, and other peers, and then it gets tricky when you have a partner, that if your sexuality and where you're wanting to be doesn't match with what your partner is wanting and where
which
we
is
are.
what I see. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's my office. Yeah.
Yeah. And I, in the couples work that I do too, it has to start individually to really understand, so that you know what you're offering yourself first and then to your partner. But life doesn't happen in a vacuum. So what do you do when you want to be in your pajamas and be left alone and read your book and you actually are happy? That's
Right.
my yum. But the world tells me that's not a yum, or my partner says that's not a yum.
Exactly.
And I think underneath that is, we are told, and we're taught this because our sex education is horrific, that if you are a sexual person, you are having sex. And if you are not having sex, you are not a sexual person.
I'm so glad you said that. Yeah.
And that doesn't resonate with me. And it doesn't resonate with the work and the studies and the research that I've done. So this framework, I think, provides a lot of healing for that sentiment, that you don't have to be involved in sexual acts in order to be a sexual person. You have to be breathing. And if you're breathing, you are inherently by birthright a sexual person. And when I work with people who are saying that, I think oftentimes it's a relief that talking to me isn't going to be a pressure to be involved in sex acts. And when the pressure is taken off and the judgment is removed, and we name the shame associated and judgment associated with that, then I think, okay, so let's rework and reframe what it means to be a sexual person.
Yeah.
And let's unlearn what we've been taught horrifically in our sex ed, or the sex ed that we didn't get. And let me tell you what I think. this is what I think a holistic sexual being is. And I introduced the 9 pillars. And the first one is sensuality. And we talked about this previously. And I've just found that to be a real place of a really beautiful entry point. And so if you're sitting there in the most comfy pajamas, then you are being a sensual person, which is sexual through your sensuality. If you are loving your book, you're making choice by agency. It's you are having a yum and pleasure filled. So you are a sexual being who's involving the pleasure in that. And I like to ride off of the pleasure and the yeses and the things that are feeling naturally yummy to you. And then we go through the other parts, and it involves sex acts, and we'll talk about, so is there any place that you do feel like a sex act with yourself or with your partner is a yum?
Right.
And there's a reason why it's halfway through the pillars, because it's not where we should start.
Right. Starting with the sensuality. So, and also, as I'm listening to you talk about this, and Laura, your question, because I hear the same thing and I go through some of that. I mean, I think there's a couple of different pieces for women that if we're willing to go on a journey of exploring and just being curious without pressure and without shame about what lights us up, what makes us feel good, where we find our sexual energy and whatever that looks like. I think there's the woman getting in bed in her pajamas, wanting to be left alone, who feels like, I still feel sexual, but I don't really want to be sexual with my partner. And that's a very difficult bridge to cross because there's something going on in the relationship that's interfered with attraction to that person, but maybe not necessarily everyone else. So she's shut down in that way because she doesn't really want to be physical with her partner. And I hear that from a lot of women. People in long-term marriages for a variety of reasons, disconnection and more. Then I think there are people who are women who are so overloaded by the mental load, the emotional toll, being in the sandwich generation. Many women at midlife today have young children in high school, children younger than high school. There are women in their 40s with kids who are 2, 3, 6 years old. They have aging parents.
Yeah,
Right.
I have an 11-year-old.
Right. They're taking care of aging parents. They're working demanding jobs. They're raising children. They feel like they're still doing the lion's share of the social and emotional labor at home. So by 8:00, it's like everyone can fuck off. I am dead. I have nothing left to give.
Read my bio.
Right. My sexual energy, it's in there, but I am so tired. I don't even have time to connect to that. And then I think there are the women who maybe that's not what's going on. They just don't feel particularly sexual. They're at that phase of life, perimenopause or menopause, where the libido's lowered. They feel very content to just read the book, whether they're tired or not. And sometimes I fall into that. Like, it's just a delicious pleasure. So I think there's a couple of different pieces to what can contribute to this, but I see a lot of women going through, forget even the hormonal stuff. I've kind of shut myself off sexually because I feel like I have to, like maybe my marriage or my partnership isn't that great, or I'm single and I'm dating. And when I date, I feel like I'm put through the emotional ringer, and these men or women or people out there I date like don't feel safe. And so it's just easier not to want and to shut myself down. So I think there's so much working against us in this beautiful journey of opening ourselves up sexually. I could see a lot of women saying, I'm afraid to open myself up sexually because who will I enjoy it with? What will I find? Like, will it work for my relationship? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I think hope can be a very scary a door to walk through.
Yes.
And when you hear someone talking about the possibility of having a sexual life on your own in a relationship with yourself sexually that is fulfilling and wonderful and vibrant and important to do, it's It's what I experience at the conferences. People run to me because they're interested and they really want to understand what that feels like. Or they're like, oh, nope. Like, I don't want to get near you. Like, don't you get that stuff onto me. Like, I'm happy and content. Like, don't influence me in thinking that, because it hurts too much to have it not happen, or it feels like the hurdles to get to where I am to what you're talking about is so far. Yeah. And I get it.
I'm like, say more about this whole like sexual life with yourself.
Mm-hmm. I often
talk about that.
Yeah. I'll ask people, is it a couple that I'm working with, or someone individually, a version of this question, which is, what is the point of sex? And I say sex because it's the starting point, but what I really mean is, what is the point of who we are as a sexual being? But that's often a little too wordy for the first part of it. And what fascinating answers that I get, but it's almost always, if we could pause at how you both just reacted to that question, that is what I get over and over and over again. I wish I could have a montage of 1,000 people going like, huh, like, I don't know, because we're not asked about that. And so you go to, most people go to like, well, procreation, even though we know it's more than that, or,
That's
it feels good to have an orgasm, or, whatever. But it's usually that's about where it lands. And those aren't wrong answers. But if that's what it's about, and especially if having children isn't on the table, or it's no longer of interest and you're past that point, then you're like, well, so then it's about pleasure. And if my partner sucks in bed and I just haven't or they're not good anymore, they're having issues that aren't good, or I don't like my partner anymore, or I'm not partner and it's not a possibility. And I love my sex toys, but we've had a long relationship and that's stale too, or whatever it is. If that's the only value, and I'm not devaluing pleasure and an orgasm, but if that's it, then I get why a book or avoidance, it feels like it shouldn't be that sex isn't, and who you are as a sexual being isn't a priority. So everyone has to get to their why.
Yes.
And my why will be different than, or slightly different, I would imagine, from other people's whys. And that is okay too. But I think it's also a pretty scary thing when I sit there in silence and in patience and say, well, let's sit with, what is the point of this? What's the why?
I'll go.
Oh, great.
This is like, what comes up for me? I read this book years ago. It's an oldie but goodie self-help book called Think and Grow Rich. Have you guys heard of this one by Napoleon Hill?
Yes.
It's an old one. He talks about sexual energy in there. And as a fuel source. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm assuming that this book was written for men, but I remember it hitting me like, oh, that's right. Like sexual energy, and I'll speak for myself, has always been, and I think it was so much easier for me to access when I felt younger and maybe a little sexier, was like that I was let into my own power. I was let into my own sense of aliveness. We talk about being alive a lot on this podcast. Mm-hmm. And it's this current of energy that is your own sense of sexiness and aliveness. And when I have my best sexual experiences, I get let into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like for me, and I'll just out myself, is that it was synonymous with me feeling a little hotter. Mm-hmm. It's about my relationship with self.
Yes.
It's a little bit less about my partner. It's a little bit more about my relationship with self. Mm. And as I don't feel a little hotter and sexier, my ability to access that current slows down.
Beautiful answer. So the thread I would pull is, how do we define and describe that current? I love that wording. And what does that look like for you? How does that feel in your body? When is it outside of sexual activity? Where do you feel it? What can you feed it? A lot of times it's creativity. When you're creating something, it feel there's a similarity to it that you can pull from it. And starting on your own, what does it mean to feel hot, and what's your relationship with your body? How are you defining? Like I have this workshop that I love called Finding Sexy, and what does that mean for you, and what is the spark and vibrancy in your life? I love it. Yeah, that's a great answer. Collecting
Yeah.
one answer or no?
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to say is vibrancy. So similar, but not exactly what Laura's saying in terms of like but I agree with you. Like the sexier you feel, I think it's like a chicken and egg thing. You know, you feel sexy, you want to have sex more, you have sex more, you feel sexier. But I think to me, what I landed on with the point of course, as a couples therapist, the first thing I thought about was connection. That like the point of sex is connection. And I'm not saying all sex has to be that kind of sex. You know, Sue Johnson distinguishes between the different types of sex in her book, Hold Me Tight. And like you have this synchronicity sex, and then sometimes there's just sex for pleasure. So I'm not saying it's always that, but it's a huge part of sex for many couples or even experiences is feeling connected to somebody else. But I think the vibrancy of feeling alive, and I agree, as an energy source and a way you feel about yourself. Like, to me, it is a part of health and wellness, is continuing to be a sexual being, which I also agree and appreciate your distinction about, doesn't necessarily have to be connected to sex acts.
Mhm. Yes.
You know, it is enjoying life, feeling your sexual energy, feeling hot and sexy, even when you're in your 50s, like I am, instead of, you know, only feeling hot and sexy when my skin looked different and my body looked different, right? So I think it's being connected to your life force.
Yes, and so life force, and I would use similar wording too. When you start with, so what is this that we're talking about? What is the point of this? What's the value of this? If you can get through your answers, and if we had 10 more people in here, we'd have overlaps and we'd have differences, and we'd be like, oh yeah, that's part of my answer too. I hadn't thought of that. That's great. Which is another reason why it's so important to do things like this and to have conversations like this, because part of what the problem is that we don't talk about it in any kind of evolved, deep way. And we don't talk about it in the context of, it's a deeper knowing of you that we're sharing. Like my answer, it sometimes varies, but in essence, it's connection too. But it's also, a lot of times in my life, I'm the anchor for other people, and I'm the holder of space for others. And when I'm really tuned into who I am as a sexual being, I release that. And for me, a lot of my whys and how I tune into who I am as a sexual being is really allowing myself to be held, either literally or figuratively, and allowing myself to be seen and heard. As a therapist, some of what we are taught in our training is to remove ourselves and who we are from the interactions, not always, but for some of it. And so who I am as a sexual being allows me to take the invisibility out, and I'm allowed to be more visible in that way, which brings me vibrancy. And sure, I mean, like, it feels great when you've had a wonderful sexual encounter and I'm feeling wanted and I'm feeling seen, and or I'm able to express that to somebody else too. That to me, that does bring like a synergy that feels really good. But I've learned, and I've only learned because I've decided it's important, because through my work, and it's inescapable that your sexual health is a critical part of your overall wellness. And there is science to back that, but there's also psychology to back that. And when we start having conversations about sensuality or pleasure, or we're talking about things that don't sound, really inherently sexual, like we've been taught, we'll have this jolt of like, but that's not sex, that's not sexual, that's not whatever. And it's just an unfortunate unlearning that we have to do. And like in the book, I'm saying this kind of over and over again, giving permission, giving examples. I give personal stories, I give client stories that they've given me permission to share, and said, like, I'll go first. This is just mine. This is just my version of what connection looks like. This is just my version of what pleasure and desire is. This is someone else's, and what's yours? And I really try to give a lot of permission of, I don't know is a valid answer. It's just, what do you do after I don't know? and I want to give encouragement to follow up with I don't know. And also in the process of unlearning, there's going to be that ambiguity of like, I think I get a new concept of what this looks like. I think I get what they're talking about. And not settling with someone else's answer, but really deciding like what is it, how this is important to me is very valid. And if you're
Right.
partnered, really hoping you have a partner who will go along that endeavor with you
Right.
and will find their own agency, and then you hope that magically what you want overlaps and makes a lot of sense, and
Yeah.
and that you can be curious and excited together, because what I've seen over and over again is once somebody, and I work with all genders, but in particularly talking to women about this, if you can get over the hurdle, if there is a hurdle of figuring out who you are as a sexual being holistically, I have never worked with somebody who was like, well, that wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
That was disappointing. That was a whole bunch of nothing. And
Mm,
and I have had people who at the end of this framework is having less sex, less like number wise, it's less sex, but it is more aligned and pleasure filled sexual activity for them, which is fabulous. So again, like this book, or my goal isn't to have people having more sex. It is to know who you are as a sexual being, because when you know who you are as a sexual being and you are enacting in all of these pillars authentically and truthfully, then all of your connections with yourself and with each of these topics and then with other people are so much more valuable to who you are, which feeds your vibrancy and your authenticity. And then you have this energy of, it either falls into the like, the trend with Melanie right now, if we don't give a fuck, it either goes into that, like, I love who I am and I just don't give a fuck anymore. Or
right.
it goes into like, I really give a fuck now. And
Yeah.
I am going to protect this part of me and who I am. And I'm good. And I feel good in my new skin.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened to me this year, is that I've had to really figure out who is the new sexual person that I've become through instant menopause. And it took me a while to get here. And I know that if I hadn't done this work before, this year would have felt incredibly scary instead of a journey that I had a lot of self-trust, because agency builds a lot of self-trust. And I do so much work in agency with people and in my own work, that when I felt lost, which I did feel lost some this year, I didn't feel lost and untethered. I felt lost in not having my answers, but
Yeah.
I had a belief in myself I'd get to the answers. And that I knew when I can course correct, I know what agency feels like, and I know what sexual agency feels like. And that's home. That's home to me. And I want that
Yeah.
for everyone.
Right. And
That's
figuring
beautiful.
out what it looks like for you at your stage of life, like what brings you pleasure and joy and a sense of aliveness. We're kind of redefining what it is to be a sexual being. And I think one difference for a lot of women at midlife, and maybe a lot of us are still on this journey, or maybe it's a never ending journey, but there's so much for women in conditioning about sexual performance
Mhm.
and having to please your partner, and the focus being on that, right? The focus of sex is on orgasm, it's on completion, it's on being titillating and arousing to your partner, and behaving in a way as a woman that's sexual, that conforms to a very, at least historically, pornographically driven ideal
Mhm.
of how women should behave sexually. So there's so much conditioning in your younger life, and you're so rewarded for behaving in those ways. And I'm speaking about more of heterosexual relationships, because that's been my own personal experience as a heterosexual woman. I'm sure these dynamics appear in some fashion for people in all kinds of relationships. But just speaking to my experience and what I hear other women saying, that at midlife, I think with the reduction of estrogen, the exhaustion, and the confidence that comes for a lot of us of knowing who we are more, knowing our worth, not having so much of it tied to male approval if you're heterosexual. So now there's less desire to like dance around and perform like a porn star and make sex all about that, which it shouldn't have been in the first place. And now it's like, okay, there's this vacuum. Like if I allow myself to be seen and to let go of just holding space and to let go of performing, what actually turns me on? What do I like? Right back to the yums and yucks. Like, what would it be like to just be present in the moment and learn, for some women, maybe for the first time at this stage of life, what actually is pleasurable to you?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, hopefully if you're partnered, you have a partner who wants to be on that journey with you. But I think for so many women, it's so deeply ingrained that sex is a performance and it's about giving
Mm-hmm.
pleasure to that other person. And then you've like done a good job. Now you can get in your pajamas and read your book because you've taken care of that task.
Mm-hmm.
You've performed well. It's over. And now you're left in peace. So this is really the opposite of all of that, of saying like, okay, what am I and what do I want to be? And how do I feel alive if I'm not catering completely to what's expected of me by society, by a partner, by my old beliefs, my old outdated beliefs? It can be a big unpacking and a big shift.
Mm-hmm. It can be. And again, going back to your why, there are not a lot of spaces in which to do this kind of work. People who do the work don't often talk about it. So you're just not like sitting around for girls' night or for coffee, although I always encourage people to do that, to share it and to normalize those conversations.
Yes.
I
Like
also
a girls sex party.
retreat. Yes, I love doing those. Those are some of my favorites. I also think there's not a lot of space to celebrate. And I think one of the things that happens, and I try to do this in my framework and in the work that I do, is just like we have on one side of the continuum of like mourning and grieving, perhaps our past sexual selves, or the disconnect between where we are and where we want to be. There's also the continuum of like sometimes when you get partnered or married, the rules become you can't talk about your sex life at all anymore. You can't talk about problems because that's disrespectful to your partner,
right?
And you can't celebrate and be like, we just had the best sex last night. You can't do anything. It becomes even more secretive in a sacred way that's different, which then really is really not good for our sexual culture or for our continued sex education, because we have to have sex education through our lifespan because it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
So I like to give space for celebration, and sometimes that starts with and I know I talk so much about yucks and yums, but it really is such a pivotal part that if you don't have that building block as one of the first steps that you know to do, then it's really hard to build upon anything that is going to be substantive and authentic. I love it. I love it when, again, we'll just speak about women, but I love it with all genders. When someone says, I would really like to, I think I want to peg somebody or whatever the thing is. And they're just like, I can't believe I said it. And like, what do you think? And I'm like, fabulous. Great.
I love how supportive you are.
What do you know about it? And, what do you think about it? Like, did you just see it in Hunting Wives? They did a scene. It was great. You're like, whatever it is. And whatever I'm not trying to go the opposite and say now we're just talking about sex acts, but there is a point that we do talk about sex acts. It is one of the pillars. And
wait, Juliana, what is PEG?
You don't know what pegging is?
I don't.
So
don't shame me for not knowing what pegging is. I don't
want a little more creative with your sex acts, girl.
No, I don't want to be more creative with my. Remember, we talked about fisting last time. Last time I learned what fisting was in our episode on the yums and yucks, but I don't know what pegging is.
Great, and
I'm not sure I could define it either. Go ahead, Juliana.
And remember, we welcome I don't knows, and those are fabulous.
Yes, and being curious and learning.
Right.
Yes,
learning and figuring out something's a no for you. Fabulous. We celebrate all of that. So pegging, there's different forms, but in essence, it is using like a strap on a dildo and performing anal sex that way. And the stereotypic definition is a woman wearing a strap on dildo and pegging a male and having sex in their anus.
That's never come up
Okay.
for me.
But
I'm
Well,
just
women
going to
now
be
I know why I
honest.
don't know what it is.
and women can do it to each other. I mean, like there's all different things. There's different
I'm
variations of it.
sure you
Sure.
can take your dildo into lots of
Anywhere.
locations.
You can put it in lots of
No,
places.
and I think if that's your thing, I am all for it. I have a visceral yuck
React.
to that.
Yeah.
I don't,
Mhm.
yeah. Like that's just not for me. But I think that's the knowing, right? Like I felt an immediate knowing in my body. And it's not, I could feel a difference from, I have no judgment about it truly that like if you want to do that, I just have a visceral like, ooh, that wouldn't be a turn on for me. So I think that's even like the point of this is that there might be something you've never heard of that your body just goes, oh, that
Yeah.
is kind of like I feel a little bit aroused by that or intrigued by that idea. Or your body goes, yeah, nope, no way. Like no matter what conditioning and happened in society, if suddenly every house was pegging, people were
Wouldn't
pegging
be
in
into it.
public, I would be the one non-pegger. Right. So I've learned that just like I learned I don't want to fist. I think what I'm learning is I'm just not like an anal like I'm not interested in the anal area.
Yeah.
I'm glad the world knows that now.
Yeah, that's okay. That's
I-
okay.
I
I'm
guess
okay with that.
What's coming up for me, and we've talked about it on other episodes, is that women, and I'm guilty of this too, is like we press the same buttons. We have the same pathways. We have the same pathways sometimes to feel sexual. We have some of the same pathways to orgasm. And when those pathways either no longer work, no longer hit the same, or we lose creativity.
Yeah.
And
Agree.
then
I
like the
agree.
door closes. So like I love the permission structure you're giving of like, can we be creative?
Yes.
Is there another way to feel alive, to get into your sexuality, to play? And
Play.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
what-
find it, and it's that beautiful relationship between what happens inside the bedroom happens outside the bedroom and outside inside. That stereotypic phrasing is actually something I think is quite powerful if you are using different terminology with it. Is that I think it informs. So what is overtly sexual can inform what isn't, and what isn't can inform what it is overtly sexual. And I also think in the permission it is to give yourself the ability to change and to give yourself the ability to be constant in that. So an example, I'll go back to pegging. I love just saying that just casually.
Yes, let's keep talking about pegging.
Part of becoming certified in a sexual educator, counselor, therapist through this organization called ASACT is that you have to go through this course called a SAR. And when I did it the first time, it was 2005, and they could all be different, but it was basically 2 days of watching porn. But there was a pegging scene, and I remember it distinctly. It was the only thing that I saw that I was like, oh no, this doesn't turn me on. And I didn't have a lot of words as to why it was a no, but I said things like, oh, it just doesn't feel masculine to me, and And when I look back on what I said, I was like, I'm a bit horrified by what my viewpoint was, but I'm proud of myself for owning what was a no for me, and I knew what I knew of myself. And I was the only one in the group that didn't think it was sexy. I check in with myself and think, so 20 years ago, this was a visceral no for me. And it is no longer, I no longer had that same reaction. And that doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter if it was the same now for 20 years or not, or what the sex act we're talking about. But what I loved in my own self-reflection was that it was so natural for me now to check in with my yes or no to that.
Right.
And it wasn't back then. And that's the growth for me, not the answer.
Right.
And that's how the book is. Like it's the process, not the destination for me and who we are as sexual beings, whether it's about a sex act or about where you are conceptualizing yourself as a sexual being.
Right.
I'm just asking everyone, please do not overlook that the process of examining who you are as a sexual being it's not a luxury. It's really a necessity. And if you are going to be focusing on who you are in your overall wellness, and you don't address who you are as a sexual being, then you are missing a huge piece of who you are. And it's a shame, and we're having a lot of, I think, consequences in our relationships, in our bodies, and culturally because we are.
Yeah.
Amen
I mean,
to that.
What's coming up for me as you're saying all of this is like now we've culturally put everything on the buffet and says like, you like, go through the buffet, take what you want. You know, pegging's a thing. People do it. If you are into it, play with it. But I think a lot of women, I know a lot of women, are like people like me do XYZ. People, you know, people like me. And so like their sexualities are very walled off. And it's like they're not even willing to sort of see the buffet. They're like, no, 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 no. I'm the type of person who I see people with those rigid identities in all kinds of areas. But I don't think a lot of people let themselves go through the buffet line, is what I'm
Right.
saying.
Right. I agree.
Right.
I
Because
To
of
agree.
say
identity.
yes, no, they don't
Right.
even walk into the buffet room.
No,
Right.
they're
They
just
just
like,
order
no.
off the menu the same thing they've gotten at that restaurant. And that like, right.
I eat
That's
salad with chicken on it. That's what I eat.
yes. Yes. And it's like there's a whole buffet in there. What if there's something in that buffet that you love that you wouldn't even know if you don't explore
Yeah.
with curiosity?
Right. When I encounter that dynamic, where I like to go is safety. And because I think what that feels like, familiarity feels safe.
Yes.
And something new does not feel safe. And so I like to explore outside of a sexual context, how does somebody try new things? And I don't want to make them wrong, because there isn't anything wrong with room service or doing, the same chicken tetrazzini every single time
Right.
at Friday nights. Like I get that too.
Yeah.
Because I also don't want to say that, hanging from the rafters and doing X, Y, and Z is, again, the right kind of sexuality. I'm just asking people to ask. And if you have the no, understand what your no is. I love doing this discussion in groups, because I think there's a lot of power and growth that can happen when we're just three of us, and I think we may have three different views on some things, and it's so powerful to be able to say, oh, this is me, next to someone who's like, that is not me, and
Right.
we're all like, cool,
Right.
great, cool,
And it's all good.
We're not none of us are wrong.
Right.
And maybe we could learn something, or again, like I think some of the most powerful places have been when someone has said yes to something for so long, and they finally say no.
Yeah.
And they don't go into that room anymore. I think that's just as powerful. And so again, like it is question with curiosity, not judgment, the reasoning behind your yeses and nos. If you are in any way open to the process of examination, then make that first step, just even if it's just a toe into it, and find other safe people to have those conversations with. And that should be curiosity. It should be celebration. It should be saying no to things. It should be a whole buffet of options for yourself. And I think it's also, or at least for me, like, I ask people to have like a fuck it list. And a fuck it list of, and I know it's playing on the words of it being sex acts, but I like when we go through all of the 9 pillars, like, what is your dream list for all of this? And this is something we were talking about before we started recording, which is in midlife, the time is now, and a lot of things. And I know I think about that for my physical health and my hormonal health and my career. I also do that for my sexual self. Now, I do hope, if I live a long life, I hope that I, at 90 am still sexual, or still whatever that means for me at that point. I still feel that I hope that I'm sexually active at some point. But I also feel like there is a limit, or there are limitations that come as we're aging, of who we are as our sexual selves. And there are times, I've moved, and so I've been packing and unpacking things, and I found this box, and I found this picture of me in a bikini, and I was like, oh, God, I did not appreciate that body. Why didn't I take a better picture of myself in that? And, that was too far away. Like, I would have just stood front and center for that picture now. And then I was like, oh, Juliana, like, what are you doing with your body right now? What are you thinking about that? And, I went through the whole conversation, and it made me think about now, because in that same day I had a conversation with a woman who's 15 years older than me, and she's like, I hear you talking about the time being now, and it's times to do these things in your career, and who you are as a sexual being. And she's like, you're a baby to me. And I'm like, I feel that same way. Like, I've got time ticking. I've got sex I want to be having. I've got career stuff I want to be doing. And I'm 70, and I encourage you to do it. Do it now.
Such a great message.
Yeah.
I need to hear that.
Yeah. And I look back at my 30-year-old self in this bikini, and I didn't know the concept of time in that way. And as I said before, like, actually the love of my life, who was a lot in this book, died not long after that photo. He took that picture of me, and I didn't obviously know that was going to happen. And we don't know the good things that are going to happen too. But I think it's fun, and it's creative, and it's helpful to even, like, what kind of things as a sexual being do I want to do now? And some of that will be sex. So, like, if you like cowgirl, which is being on top, and your knees don't work like they used to, then it's time to do it now, or it's time to figure out pillows on how to do it, and
You have to adapt a little.
It's like, let's say I do. And that's the last time that we do that position, and we say goodbye to it, and we find the position that we like now. Or it's who we are as a sensual being, that it's like, this is my chapter of who I am as a sensual being, or who I am in my desire. And who do you want to be? Because time is ticking, and there's no greater time, frankly, in our culture than to position sexuality as a pivotal part of who we are, and to claim it on our own selves, because if we're going to change the sexual culture, it starts with you. And the way we change, in my eyes, our sexual culture is that we position a culture of sexual agency that doesn't oppress others. It also doesn't glorify others. And that is an inside job that if more people keep doing it, and it doesn't mean that we have a homogeneous way of looking at who we are as a sexual being, but if we have sexual agency as the connecting factor, then we shift. We get more of our rights back, we get more ownership, and we have more authentic connections. And what I've seen is it reduces the negativity that comes along with sexual behavior and mindset when you are rooted in sexual agency. And the time is now to learn that if you haven't already.
Oh my God. I could listen to you talk about that all day. Like, this is like inspiring to me.
That is the most inspiring, powerful note to end on. I'm so glad you said that. So tell everyone where they can find you, where they can find your book, all that good stuff, because the book is the place to start with all of this.
Yeah, thank you. So it is going to be on, the online platforms, and like Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Also, you can go to my website at dr-juliana.com, and there's a place to buy it on there. It will link you to whatever. You can choose on my website what online source that you will buy the book, and my book is only going to be online. And then I'm going across the country, and we're even now starting to look at outside of the country. One thing I wanted to say about that I decided to put in this book is that there's QR codes that I have at the end of the pillars. And in the end of the pillars, you'll take your phone, do the QR code, and it's going to take you to my website, and you'll hear other stories. So there's only so much you can fit in a book, and I really wanted people to hear other stories, to understand more about what stories they would bring forward with each of it. And within that, there's going to be a capability for you to write your own story, write it to me, write it onto the website, to share it with others. And you can do it anonymously, confidentially, or you can do it publicly. And I'm very excited to interact with people and have people sharing who they are. And I will be putting it on the platform. It comes out September 23rd. And I'm really, really excited to put it in everyone's hands.
Well, we can't wait.
Great.
And the book is A New Position on Sex by Dr. Juliana Hauser. Go grab a copy online, ASAP. Go get it. I've read it. It's amazing. You're amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Always thought-provoking.
Come back anytime.
Yes. We want to have you back again soon after you
let's
finish your worldwide tour. And I'll learn a new sex act that probably my little vanilla self doesn't want to do. But that's great. I love it. I welcome it all.
Yes,
so
great.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all you guys for listening. We hope you got some great insights from our couch today, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.